So the player could either be one of two colors, red or blue. So let's get a branch. So I'm going to hold down the B key, left click. I'm going to connect these up like so. And we're going to grab in our color index. Just drag it in. So what we're going to do, we're going to drag off this and we're going to type equals equals. We're going to choose equals integer. And this is going to go into this pin right here. Then what we're going to do, we're going to get the cube like so, drag it in. And what we're going to do, we know that the material that the cube has is a instance. It's a material instance. And it has a parameter called color. Now color is a vector parameter value. All right, so let's go back into player BP. What we're going to do, we're just going to set vector parameter. And we're going to choose the set vector parameter value on materials cube. We already have reference to that, so if it's true, if it equals 0, if side index, actually not side index, we want the color index, sorry. So let's get our color index. If our color index equals 0, then we will just default that color to being red. So RGB, that's how Unreal reads this. So red. And the parameter name will be color. It's case sensitive, so you have to make sure that the case matches that of your parameter name. So if it's 0, then it will just default the color to being red. And if not, I've selected this, duplicated it by pressing Ctrl W. If not, we'll make it blue. So 0 out the red. So red, 0, green, and blue. So blue will be 1. And that's basically it. So all we've got to do now is just add a nice comment for this. So we just highlight it all and press C. Let's add a comment. We'll call this set up game settings. Let's set up the event that will call the HUD for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in. I'm going to grab this. So I'm going to click on this custom event here and I'm going to press Ctrl W. And it will add what that will do, it will add a new custom event. It will duplicate it and add a new custom event where the mouse location is. So with this selected, Ctrl W. And I'm going to call this call HUD. So call HUD. Okay. So what we're going to do, we're just going to drag off this and we're going to type create widget. And we're going to choose create widget. And the widget we're going to be creating is our pre-game menu. So pre-game menu UI. So we're going to select that. And after we've created that, we're going to add it to the viewport. So add to viewport. And after that, what we're going to do, we're going to get the player controller. So right click, get player controller. And we're going to set input mode, game and UI. I'm going to connect this up, and we want to be able to see the cursor. So let's drag off this, and we're going to show mouse cursor. So we're going to set show mouse cursor. Let's move this up here, and we're going to connect this to that, and we're going to set this to true. And there we go. That's that. So we can draw a box around this, and we can press C to add a comment, and we're going to call this something. Call the hood. Let's create the input event that would allow us to pause and unpause our game. So remember, in our inputs, in our project settings, input, we have a action mapping called pause game. So we're going to use that. We're going to go back to player BP. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to type pause game. I'm going to add that. So click on that. And in its details panel, we're going to enable execute when paused, because some inputs don't work when the game's paused. On this one, we want it to be an exception to that rule. So enable that. And what we want is that whenever we press the pause button, it will toggle between being paused and being unpaused. So toggle between pause and resuming. So we're going to use a flip-flop node. So drag off pressed and add a flip-flop. Now this is a useful node, especially for when you want to toggle between two states, either on or off. So here, when we press it, we want to set game paused to true. So drag off that and type set game paused. This is the one we want. So we're going to enable this to true. And with this highlighted, I'm going to press Control W to duplicate it. And I'm going to set this to false. We're going to drag this off B. So when we pause it, we want to call the pause menu. Okay. So off paused, we're going to drag this pin, this execution pin, and we're going to create a menu widget. So create widget. And the widget we're going to create is the pause menu UI. And we're going to add it to the viewport. But before we do that, we have to actually store it as a variable so we know what pause menu is what, because you don't want to lose track of it. So let's promote this to a variable. So I'm going to drag off this pin and promote to variable. And I'm going to call this pause menu. As a matter of fact, we already have pause menu down here, so just get rid of that. So we're going to drag our pause menu in, and we're going to set pause menu, connect this up, like so. And then after that, we're going to add to viewport. Okay. So when that's done, when we unpause the game, what happens is that we want to remove the pause menu from the screen, from the viewport. So let's get the pause menu, and we will drag off that and remove from parent. Okay. So this is what happens when you pause the game, and this is what happens when you resume. So let's drag a box over this, and we'll add a comment for it. So press C, and we'll call this pause / resume game. Let's create the events that will drive and also initialize these most of these behaviors. So at the top, I'm just going to right click and I'm going to add a begin play. So event begin play. And I'm going to right click again and add a event tick or event tick. Now our begin play will call the HUD, the head-up display. So drag this off and call HUD. And the event tick will call the setup game settings. So it will constantly check if the player is ready. And if the player is ready, boom, it will run this, all of this, and it would only do it once because it's going through a do once node. And we're not going to reset it. So from here, we will set up game settings. So I'm going to drag a box over all of this, press C, and I'm going to call this events. And I'm going to make this red. And I want to color the bubble as well. So now let's go over the logic of what happens when the ball comes into contact with the paddle. It's quite basic what happens. So if this is our paddle, let's see if we can draw a paddle here. Try and draw one. Like so. So if this is our paddle, our paddle has a low box, which is down here somewhere, like so. The low collision box. It has a medium collision box here in the middle, and then it has a high collision box, which is like up here, like so. So when the ball hits the middle box, if the ball was to hit the middle box like so, it will send it away on a middle trajectory like that. If the ball was to hit this high box, it would actually send it away at a basically higher trajectory than the middle box. And the thing about this is that we're going to set it up so that it would actually gradually increase. So if it hits the high box, it will send it away at a trajectory like something like that. And then if it was to hit it again, it would send it away like that. What happens also is that it increases the velocity of it each time it hits this high box or the low box. Likewise, the low box, we're going to send it away at a trajectory. If the ball was to hit this low box, it will send it away on a downward trajectory like that. And it would basically hit it away quite quick. And the more it hits these end boxes, the more the speed will increase. But also what we're going to do on the ball, when it moves too fast, then we're going to actually bring the speed down so that it regulates and stays within a certain region, certain range. So that's my terrible explanation out of the way. Let's get down to implementing it. So let's start with the up box. So I'm going to click on up box, and in the details panel, I'm just going to scroll all the way to the bottom. And we're going to use the on component begin overlap. So it's this one right here. Just going to click on that. We're going to do the same for mid box. So on component begin overlap, Gonna add one for that one, and also the low box on component begin overlap. Windbox is going to need one as well. So let's click on Windbox and on component begin overlap. So we're just going to set the logic for what happens when the ball enters a designated collision box. So for the up box, if the ball enters the up box, we're going to check that the ball hit is false. So I'm going to hold down B, left click to add a branch condition, and I'm going to connect this to that. We first need to check that the ball hit is false. So we're going to get ball hit, drag it in to the graph, and I'm going to drag off that pin and type not, so N-O-T, and we're going to choose not Boolean. And this is going to go into that, like so. Next, what we're going to do, we're going to cast to the ball blueprint using the other actor. So from other actor, I'm going to drag off that and type cast to ball underscore BP. And that's our ball blueprint class, our act class. And we're going to connect this up. Now remember that up and down is the x-axis. So that means that because the ball hits the up box, it's going to send it away on a upward trajectory. So to go back to player BP, what we're going to do, we're going to get the current ball velocity. So get velocity. So we're going to get the velocity. And what we're going to do to go upwards, what actually happens is that if I just grab a box here, yeah, to go upwards, the value actually increases. But essentially, what we're going to do, we're just going to negate the vector value. So we're going to divide this, so /, so vector divided by float, and we're going to divide it by -1, so -1. And what we're going to do from here, we're going to add a add to vector, so just drag off that, plus, so vector plus vector. Now on this secondary vector B pin, I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to split struct pin. You're going to get the end speeds, which is 1. I'm going to drag it in like so, and I'm going to connect this to X on the B vector. And then lastly, we're going to set the velocity from the ball. So set velocity. Scroll down and we can see it right here. So I'm going to select that, connect this to this, and this will go into that, like so. When that's done, it's going to set the ball hit. So I'm going to set ball hit to true. And then there'll be a delay. So you're going to drag off this and type delay. Enter. We'll have a delay of about 1 second. So it's got a duration of 1 second. And then we're allowed to interact with the ball again. So I'm just going to click on this ball hit, press Ctrl W to duplicate it. I'm going to set it back to false. and this will go, this velocity here from this set of events will go into this ball hit. Now the reason why we do this is to prevent multiple input readings from the overlap events. So we essentially are allowing 1 second cooldown before we can listen for new overlap events. So that's that one. So now we're going to cover what mid box and low box does. So for the mid box, what we're going to do, I'm going to select all of this, not this bit though, and then I'm going to press Control W and duplicate it. I'm going to space these out a bit. So when the ball hits the mid box, the same thing's going to happen. So this goes to that, and other actor goes to the object. The only difference here is that the ball will not be sent away on a upward or downward trajectory. Instead, we just want it to be pretty quick from the center. So I'm going to hold down the Alt key and left click to disconnect that, and I'm just going to drag off that pin and make vector. Because we don't want X or Z to have any offset. We don't really do anything with the Z anyway, it's mainly the X and the Y. So we don't want anything with the X. So what I'm going to do, we're going to get the velocity from this, and we're going to break it. So I'm actually going to disconnect. I'm actually going to delete all this actually, because this is the mid box. We're going to get the velocity, and I'm going to break the vector. That I'm going to get the Y value, and I'm going to multiply it by a float because it's going to be pretty slow. So let's speed it up by multiplying it by a float. So times float, float times float. And we're going to have a value of 1.004. You can always experiment with this. And we need to negate it because it needs to bounce back from where it's been to where it's coming from. Okay, so drag off that, and I'm going to divide this by float, and the value we're going to divide it by is -1 to invert it, and this is going to go into Y like that. And this, after we set the velocity for that, we're going to set ball hit to true, and then again set it to false. So that's what happens when the mid box detects the ball. Now, when the ball hits the low box, the exact same thing will happen as when it hits the high box, but the only difference being that the offset value for the trajectory is inverted. So let's connect these up like that. And other actor will go to object, and just drag this off. It's the end speeds. We want to invert this. So let's divide this by float, and we're going to divide it by -1, and this will go into the X like so. And after we set the velocity, it will go straight into the ball hit. So we can just tidy this up a bit. Lastly, we're going to set up the Windbox logic. And now this is the event that happens when the Windbox detects the ball from the CPU and or computer, and the computer scores a point against the player. So this is the Windbox, and from the Windbox we're going to cast to the ball. I'm just going to grab this node here. We don't need to check if the ball's hit because it happens regardless of actor. It goes into the object. And when this happens, what happens is that the CPU score will increase. So we're going to increase CPU score. CPU score. So we're going to set CPU score. So what we're going to do here, we're going to get the current CPU score, and we're going to add a integer to it. So we can add 1 to it, and we're going to set that to the current value. We'll set that to the new value. Then after doing that, you're going to set player ready to false. Then there'll be a delay. We'll have a delay of about 3 seconds. Again, you can experiment with this and see what values work good for you. Then we really want to call an event inside of the ball, which we'll set up after doing this. So the event will be called in the ball like that, but it doesn't exist yet. Then after that event's called, we'll set player ready to true again. So the player's ready to go. Let's just quickly create that event inside the ball blueprint class so that we can call it when the CPU scores against us. So head on over to the ball underscore BP, which is this one right here. We're going to go to its event graph, and I'm just going to get rid of all of this here. We don't need it for now. I'm going to right click and create a custom event. And let's call this custom event reset ball logic. So reset ball logic. Okay. So what this event will do is get the velocity, and we'll set the velocity to 0, 0, 0. Like that. And we're going to need another event that will allow the ball's velocity to be reset. So we'll just make that after this. So after doing that, we're going to set the actor location to 0, 0, and on the z-axis it's going to be 10. I'm just going to click on this custom event right here, and I'm going to press Ctrl W to duplicate it, and I'm going to call that this event here reset velocity. So reset velocity. Because we want to call that on this reset ball logic event. So reset velocity. And this will go into there like that. So let's create what this reset velocity connects to. We're going to create another custom event. So I'm going to, with this highlighted, I'm going to press Ctrl W. And this new event is going to be called a set ball velocity. So set ball velocity. And what this is going to do is it's going to cast to the player BP. So cast to player BP. And one way to get the player is to get the player controller. So get player controller. And from the player controller, we're going to get the controlled pawn. So get controlled pawn. And this will go straight into the object input for a parameter for this node. We want to check if the player is ready. So player ready. So I'm going to hold down B, left click, to add a branch node. If the player is ready, if that's true, then we want to do this once. So do once. And this will connect to, this is what the reset velocity connects to. So if the player is ready, we'll have a delay of about 2 seconds. And we will set the velocity. So let's grab this and we're going to set it. I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to split the struct pin. And we could either set the ball to go right or to go left. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to right click and make array. I'm going to get this, get a copy. As you can see, the type of the array isn't defined, but it will automatically get defined after it detects what we connect this to. So green is usually color coded to a float. So I'm going to connect this to Y, and I'm going to add another input here. Now we want the ball velocity on the Y to be 1.5. So going left, I believe, so if you look down, going left will be negative 1.5 and going right will be positive 1.5. So back in the ball, I'm going to put negative 1.5 as the first array element here and positive 1.5 here. Now this is just a nice way to make an array without having to use any variables. Now what we want is to randomly pick either the first or second element in this array. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to type in random integer in range, and this is what we're going to use. So click on that and we're going to connect this to the input array index. The minimum is 0 and the maximum is going to be 1. I'm going to go ahead and connect this to the set velocity node. And that's that.